the University of Chicago, in collaboration with the Columbia Broadcasting System, presents The Human Adventure.
In the great universities of the world, scientists, scholars, students press forward in the search for human knowledge.
Harvard,
Columbia,
Oxford, Pennsylvania,
the University of Michigan,
the London School of Economics,
Stanford,
Johns Hopkins,
Yale. This is the human adventure of men and women who, inspired by exalted curiosity, ruled by the strictness of the scientific method, work endlessly to understand.
To understand, to think, to know.
Above all else, mankind is distinguished for qualities of mind. And above all other adventures, the search for knowledge with which to advance the power of his mind and the well-being of his body is the greatest. Tonight, the University of Chicago, in collaboration with the Columbia Broadcasting System, presents the second in a series of broadcasts examining the human adventure of Inquiring Minds. "200 miles from the Persian Gulf, 3,000 feet above sea level, lies the site of Persepolis, once the capital of the world. Here, 2,500 years ago, the slaves of Darius, the great Persian king, labored a lifetime building a magnificent palace of stone, that the world should not soon forget the vanity and might of a man. But the world did forget much of Darius. Other dictators ripped his empire to shreds, burned his palaces, and desert sandstorms buried the broken columns, the magnificent sculpture, and hid them, until a group of patient scientists sunk their picks into the pile of rubbish that once was the glory of Persia. Unique in the world is the University of Chicago Oriental Institute, a vast laboratory which the late Professor James Henry Breasted, whose writings entitled The Human Adventure suggested the name for this broadcast series, established for the study of man's rise from savagery to civilization.
For years, the Oriental Institute has sent expeditions into the far corners of the earth to seek the story man has left behind him on tablets and caves, in ruins and graves. In 1931, such an expedition began work in southwestern Persia under the general direction of Professor Breasted and Professor Herzfeld of the University of Berlin. And the site of the ancient city of Persepolis, where only camel bells had broken the age-long silence, echoed with such strange sounds as the roar of an airplane, scouting the terrain, recording on photographic plates the shadows.
1,000 feet, Professor Herzfeld.
Good. I will take several photographs at this height. Then climb to 2,000 and circle, please.
Right. We'll have to make it snappy. There's a sandstorm coming.
While below, a motor truck lurches over the dusty road, swallowing through the mud in bad weather to the nearby border town of Shiraz, for the daily provender of chicken, beef, mutton, and fresh vegetables.
Cut again. Pile out, boys, and push.
Hey, I came to Persia to look for buried cities.
Well, here's a truck. You can excavate right now.
All right, boys. All together. Push!
Sun-washed Marvdasht Valley echoes with the taking the rubble and dirt to the dump beyond the digging.
Ahmed, tell the men that every bit of rubbish must be picked over before it is placed in the cars. What did he say?
He said, what are you looking for? Gold?
No. Tell him we are searching for history. The history of his people.
They say you cannot eat history.
True. But we should see it come to life before our eyes.
And bit by bit, the hard-packed earth yielded up its secret, and Persepolis did come to life. First, the harem of Darius, rebuilt and roofed as staff headquarters. Then the winter palace of Darius and his son Xerxes. And then the great audience hall of the King of Kings with its 100 lofty columns, its magnificent sculptured stairways where life-size figures marched upward toward the royal reception room.
Taking 8 workers and an assistant, Friedrich Kressler, an architect on Professor Herzfeld's staff, began to dig near the northeastern corner of the terrace. Transformed with their shovels and hoes a casual heap of adobe and rubbish into a series of walls joining at the corner of what must have been the vast main room of the great audience hall. And at a depth of 3 feet beneath the foundation stone
Easy, Ark. Easy. You've hit something. Hand me that hoe.
Yeah.
There it is. A piece of white limestone.
It looks as though it had been roughly chiseled.
That's right, it has. I'll brush it off. This stone was obviously put here for a purpose.
Yes, sir.
But wait. Better send all the men to the main dig. All except Gorgi. He's the only one I trust.
Arkashe. Misavanat Payasuyati Buzuk Barabes. Vale Gorgi. The man at Enjo.
Now, when I lift this head, Gorgi, place the nows underneath.
Very sorry.
Ready? Now you got it? Then make fast, and while Eric and I steady the ends, raise the rock with the windlass.
All right, easy now. That's it. There it comes. What's that beneath, Mr. Kressler?
It appears to be the broken top of a limestone coffer.
Badly cracked, isn't it?
Yeah. Probably by the sudden fall of the mighty walls as they came crashing down when Alexander the Great burned Persepolis.
Cracked and yet how beautifully carved. Oh, hurry, Mr. Kressler. Let's see what's in that box.
Not so fast, young man. This box is laying here for 2,500 years. It can guard its secret for a few more minutes while we photograph it.
Working with a deliberation he did not feel, Kressler photographed the box from every angle while his young assistant shifted with excitement and impatience. At last they were ready to reveal the secret hidden these 25 centuries. With utmost care, Mr. Kressler removed the broken top.
It's a plate, a gray metal plate. Is that all? A flock of silver.
But it doesn't say anything.
The edges have oxidized with age, and it's stuck. Hand me a small chisel.
It's yielding. It's coming up. There's an inscription on the back.
But Mr. Kressler wasn't looking at the inscription. He was gazing down into the bottom of the box.
Eric, look.
What is it?
Beneath the first silver plaque lay another, shining like a mirror, reflecting the amazed and incredulous faces of the scientists as they peered down into the coffin in which it had been buried for 25 centuries.
Another plaque. This of solid gold. As bright and fresh as though it had just been placed there.
Inscribed, too. And so beautifully. Can you read it, Mr. Kressler? It seems to contain several languages.
No. I am only an architect. This is a task for Dr. Herzfeld.
Oh.
Fetch Professor Herzfeld, Gorgi. Run.
Professor Herzfeld, scholar, explorer, adventurer, too often accustomed to the disappointments of a fruitless search, was at first too moved to speak. He took the gold plaque in his hand and gazed at it intently, while the other scientists gathered close, sensing that this was one of those moments for which archaeologists labor a lifetime.
Gentlemen, you have made a tremendous discovery. For 2,500 years, this plaque has lain here, hidden from the eye of man, guarding its message to posterity. The message of the great King Darius. Yes, Darius, who built these mighty palaces, who emblazoned his achievements in his magnificent sculpture around us. Darius, who speaks to us across the mist and dust of 25 centuries. I, Darius, the great king, the king of kings, the king of the land of many skies,
the king of this wide, far-stretching earth. A Persian, son of a Persian, an Aryan of purest Aryan lineage. Speak! This is the empire which I possess from the Saka, or beyond Sud to the Kusha, from Hindus as far as Farda. This is my empire, which the gods have granted to me, who are the king of kings. These my words are a symbol and a promise that the great empire of the Persians shall endure forever.
Silence. Silence now, and desolation. Today, in the sun-washed silence of the Persian moon, tribute kings still march up the great stair at Persepolis in sculptured immortality. Their beauty and majesty, a memorial both to the highest development of Persian civilization and the diligence of the scientists Breasted, Hetzfeld, Cresta, who found in two small plaques carved in gold and silver words that revealed for the first time to modern man the vast boundaries of an ancient empire, whose devotion to their work succeeded in filling one more page in the book of man's journey from the cave to the skyscraper.
The men who built the palaces of Darius were slaves. Working side by side with the beasts of the field, they and their fellows before them quarried the great stone blocks and dragged them over the baking sands and piled them high to make the pyramids of Egypt, the towers of Babylon, the palaces of Persia.
These men were slaves, but in the centuries that succeeded, there arose a new kind of slave, the slave of iron and wood and steel, the machine.
I am the machine. Never stop, never weaken, never strike, never sicken, never die. Why? I am the machine. Copper, iron, gold, steel, piston, cog, pulley, wheel, steam, fire, and electricity. That's me, the machine.
To ease his own labors, to increase his wealth, to add to his skill and power, man builds machines.
To do the work of a dozen men, of 50 or 500, of 1,000 or 1,000,000 or even
12 billion, for that is the number of slaves that would be required to accomplish the labor of our modern machines. Yet, modern machines have taken away the jobs of more than 1 million unemployed workers in America today. Men with strong muscles, willing hands, displaced by turbine, cog, flywheel, and electricity.
Is the machine man's enemy or friend? Should man endeavor to control the machine? What can be done to find new work for men displaced by machines?
As a first grasp at knowledge, field workers, trained in universities for social service work, assemble facts about men displaced by machines. They interview thousands of men and women, go into their homes and talk to them and their families.
Your name?
Tony Koval.
Nationality?
American, you bet. Polish once.
Age?
33.
What's your occupation?
Occupation? Oh, you mean the job, nothing.
Well, your former occupation, then.
Heater's helper. Yeah, that's me. Tony Koval. 33, married, 3 kids. Heater's helper once.
Heater's helper. Hot work in front of the great furnaces that heat the steel sheet. Just before they're put through the rolling mill.
It's hot and it's heavy work. And everybody can't do it. You got to know how. You got to have a skill. But it don't mean nothing. One day our mill put in a big machine. It could roll out cold steel. It used 1.5 million pounds pressure. They didn't have hot steel anymore.
Martin Kelly, heater's helper. Your services will no longer be required.
Andre Lebeau,
Peter's help.
Your services will no longer be required.
Anthony Koval, Peter's help.
Your services will no longer be required.
But I'm young yet, only 23. Maybe I can find another job in steel somewhere. I'm still looking for it anyhow. Still hoping. I ain't gonna let that machine lick me.
But the machine has licked Anthony Koval. There's no place for him in steel. For him, the only course is to learn a new trade, to start all over again.
That's all right for Koval. He's young yet. But what about me? I'm 48.
54, 49.
These machines make an old man of it. Put down the scrap heap before you're 50.
Scrap for kids are easy to train.
We gotta live too, don't forget.
Yeah. What about us?
Well, what about them? In order to stop machines from displacing men, should we endeavor to control the machine, to retard its advance, to muzzle its steel jaws? Says Dr. William J. Ogburn, professor of sociology, University of Chicago.
You cannot stop change. You cannot stop the advance of the machine. One might as well brush back the tides with a broom. If you want to stop change, you'll have to break up the machine, or better still, poison all inventors.
But today, university scholars endeavor to direct and predict the grinding advance of machines by the application of knowledge, the study of facts, the use of reason. Thus, Percy W. Bidwell of the University of Buffalo, editor of the American Council on Education, says,
Machines also make jobs, make work, and give employment to many.
The mechanical refrigerator, though it displaced several thousand icemen, created jobs for more than 20,000 factory workers.
The automobile doomed the carriage makers, but gave jobs to literally millions of skilled workers in scores of allied trades.
Professors Ogburn, Bidwell, and the other scholars interested in the problem of machines make this conclusion.
As new machines are introduced, little pools of people out of work form here and there. After months or years, the little pools may grow very large. Then, with the invention of new machines, they evaporate while other pools are forming elsewhere. Thus, though particular workers may be displaced, others are employed, and in the long run, the effect may not be a decrease in the total amount of unemployment.
So the professor says in the long run, everything will work out.
He does? Ask him how long.
Until the pools evaporate, he says. That's economics, Joe.
To him, it's economics. To me, it's when do I get a job? How long do I have to wait? I still gotta live until another job comes along.
Yes, of course you must live until another job comes along. And yet you must realize that the answer to the problem of men replaced by machines is broader, bigger than just your problem alone. We know there are 1 million men like yourself out of a job because machines are doing your work. The question of what to do for you men until you get a job is part of what the scholars are trying to answer, but only a part. What of the 9 million other men out of work because of many reasons? His situation is like yours. He must be taken care of until a new job comes along, too. And scholars have found that the problem of what to do with one group of unemployed men must be considered as part of the whole question of unemployment. That is why, on this entire issue, these scholars suggest that
there be established an efficient system of public employment offices.
United States Government Employment Service.
I'm a mechanic. Is there any use in coming down to see about work? Are there any jobs?
Yes, we have some. Come down and register.
Well, I haven't any money. If it's going to cost anything,
There's no charge for helping you get a job. This is a government office.
First advocated in England by Sir William Beveridge of the London School of Economics, the Public Employment Office has been tried successfully in most American states, many American cities.
Public works should be distributed with due reference to the demand for labor in private industry.
General training programs for young men and women must be developed.
But you're just a young fellow. I don't understand why you can't find a job.
I'm not sure I do either.
But there's need for trained young hands.
Sure, only I'm trained to just one kind of job. I wish I had a general education instead of a specialized one. Things change too fast.
In an effort to produce such programs for youth, many eminent professors have served the Bureau of Vocational Education in its efforts to produce such programs.
The establishment by industry of a new social plan called the quitting wage should be encouraged.
George Smith, stoker engineer.
Your services will no longer be required.
But, Mr. Smith, if you'll please fill out this company form, you'll receive a percentage of your past average wage over a period of several weeks to enable you to train for and find other work.
A special service for the training and employment of casual workers should be established.
What's your occupation?
Well, mister, I'm sort of a jack of all trades. Sometimes I work around the docks. 1 or 2 days a week I fit in the garbage trucks. When things are slack, I try to rustle up a few dimes carrying bags.
Why don't you stick to one kind of a job?
Well, I ain't trained for anything in particular.
Supposing this bureau trained you, gave you an aptitude test to find out what you can do, and then saw to it that you were taught to do it.
What good would that do if I couldn't get a job?
We'd help you get a job.
And perhaps most important of all, a coordinated, workable system of unemployment insurance. A safeguard against social shock, fathered by the great John R. Commons of the University of Wisconsin.
I don't know what I'd do if it weren't for these checks. They keep me going till maybe something will open up.
It takes away the fear of losing your job all of a sudden.
Some of these are emergency measures. Some of them may be adopted permanently. That is up to the governments and the people they represent. The men in the universities have no axes to grind, no politics to play. Their services to the people are those of unbiased experts, of men who do not tell us what to do, but who tell us what will probably happen if we do one thing or another. These men devote their lives to learning so that you and I may someday master the machines we have built.
In its desire to learn, in the search for the full truth about man, a university endeavors to weigh all evidence, all facts, all knowledge. For only through the study of all things relating to man can man be understood. Thus, even poetry excites academic curiosity, for poetry is the root of literature. In poetry, man has found expression for his joys and sorrows, his yearnings toward the unknown future, and his memories of things past.
As Robin Hood and Little John walked by a bank of broom, said Robin in a mournful voice, I fear approaching doom. Now bring me here my much-loved bow, one arrow I'll let fly, and wheresoe'er that arrow lights, there let my body lie.
This is the ballad of the death of Robin Hood. A ballad sung not 500 years ago in merry England, but sung today in the backwoods of the state of Virginia by Back Hill's people who've received these songs in an unbroken chain from father to son for generations.
Robin Hood is one among 650 ballads collected over a period of 20 years by Professor Arthur Kyle Davis of the University of Virginia and published in a highly documented form as the first definitive volume of the traditional ballads of Virginia.
Ballads are songs that tell stories, short narratives, simple in plot and metrical structure.
Says Professor Davis,
there are many ballads in which the history of the story can be traced from its early roots in Old England to its present-day form in Virginia. These ballads, which are today such a part of the culture of Virginia, were brought to America after 1607 by settlers from England and Scotland. Thus, the old ballad Edward was probably sung round the campfires by Scotch-Irish soldiers in the army of George Washington. Since that time, the ballad in its original form has been set to music and has long been a concert favorite.
Why runs your sword so red with blood, Edward, Edward? Why runs your sword so red with blood, and why so sad go ye? Oh, I have slain my hawk so good, mither, mither. Oh, I have slain my hawk so good, I have no more but thee. Your hawk's blood never was so red, Edward, Edward. Your hawk's blood never was so red, my dear son, I tell thee. Oh, I have killed my red-roan steed, mither, mither. Oh, I have killed my red-roan steed that once was fair and free. Your steed was old, and you've got more, Edward, Edward. Your steed was old, and you've got more, some other thing you've done. Oh, I have stricken my father dead, mither, mither. stricken, my father dead. Alas, woe is me.
That was the original Scotch form. But by the time the ballad Edward was collected in Virginia, many things had happened to it. But fundamentally, the ballad is the same story.
How come that red blood on your coat? Pray, son John, tell it to me.
It is the blood of my fine horse that ran away with me.
How come that red blood on your coat? Pray, son John, tell it to me.
It is the blood of my fine Gilligo hound that trailed the track for me.
How come that red blood on your coat? Pray, son John, tell it to me.
The blood of my poor little brother that rode along with me.
How did you and your brother fall out? Pray, son John, tell it to me.
We fell out about a chestnut bush, which you might call a tree.
What will you do when your father comes home? Pray, son John, tell it to me.
Many old English ballads, Barbara Allen, Johnny Armstrong, The Rose of England, and others, were brought over to Virginia in early days and have been handed down orally from father to son and never recorded until the present collection. Among the most popular narrative songs recited and sung hundreds of years ago in England is the one entitled Sir Rylus. Originally, it described the adventures of a knight who killed a wild boar for the sake of a beautiful lady.
Sir Robert Bolton had 3 sons.
Wind well thy horn, good hunter.
And one of them was called Sir Rylus.
For he was a jovial hunter.
He ranged all round down by the woodside.
Wind well thy horn, good hunter.
Till up in a tree a lady he spied.
For he was a jovial hunter. Oh, what dost thou mean, fair lady? Wind well thy horn, good hunter.
Oh, the wild boar has killed my lord and men, as thou beest a jovial hunter.
And what shall I do this boar to see?
Blow thee a blast, and he'll come to thee.
And the wild boar heard him pull into his den. Then he made the best of his speed unto him. The wild boar being so stout and so strong.
Blow well thy horn, good hunter.
He thrashed down the trees as he came along.
Sir Rylus, jovial hunter.
Then they fought 4 hours in a long summer's day.
Wind well thy horn, good hunter.
Till the boar would fain have gotten away.
From Sir Rylus, jovial hunter.
Then Sir Rylus drawed his broadsword with might.
Wind well thy horn, good hunter.
And he fairly cut his head off quite.
For he was a jovial hunter.
In the search for traditional Virginia ballads, we discovered a version of Sir Rylus which had been handed down in one family from the time of the great-grandfather, who lived at least 150 years ago. Today, the ballad is known as Old Bangham. The English knight has become an American woodsman.
Old Bangham would a hunt and ride, dill-um down, dill-um. Old Bangham would a hunt and ride, dill-um, dill-um down. Old Bangham would a hunt and ride, sword and pistol by his side. Cubby-kai, cuddle down, tilly-quo-quam.
There's a wild boar in this wood.
Dill-um down, dill-um.
There's a wild boar in this wood.
Dill-um, dill-um down.
There's a wild boar in this wood. He'll eat your meat and drink your blood.
Cubby-kai, cuddle down, tilly-quo-quam. Oh, how shall I this wild boar see? Dill-um down, dill-um. Oh, how shall I this wild boar see? Dill-um, dill-um down. Oh, how shall I this wild boar see? Blow a blast and he'll come to thee. Cubby-kai, cuddle down, tilly-quo-quam. Oh, Bangham blew so loud and shrill. Dill-um down, dill-um. The wild boar heard on Temple Hill. Dill-um, dill-um down. The wild boar came with such a rush, he tore down hickory, oak, and ash. Cubby-kai, cuddle down, tilly-quo-quam. Old Bangham drew his wooden knife. Dill-um down, dill-um, and swore that he would take his life. Dill-um, dill-um down.
They fought 9 hours of the day, and then the wild boar run away. Clubby-kai, cuddle down, killy-quo-quam. Clubby-kai, cuddle down,
The ballads were sometimes taught to the Negro slaves, who in turn transmitted them orally from generation to generation, at times changing the original ballad, adding words, altering locale, modifying tone. An ancient Scotch ballad, the Twa Corbies, that is, the Two Crows in its original state several hundred years ago, told the story of 2 crows who, wondering what to have for dinner, decided to feast on a new slain knight.
As I was a-walking all alone, I heard 2 corbies macking a meal. The chin unto the other say, where shall we gang and dine today? In behint yon Allsvale dyke, I wot there lies a new slain knight. And nobody kens that he lies there, but his horse, his hund, and his lady fair.
But after being handed down from family to family for over 200 years, and after traveling from bonnie Scotland to Virginia, the Twa Corbies somehow increased their number and became the 3 Crows. The feast was changed from a slain knight to a dead horse, armored knights being rare in Virginia. The listener will note modifications in style, for the influence of the Southern Negro, with his gay rhythmic nature, soon divested the original Scotch ballad of its austere quality. In America, therefore, the Twa Corbies became this happy-go-lucky folk song.
There was 3 crows sat on a tree. Billy McGee, my God.
There was 3 crows sat on a tree.
Billy McGee, my God. There was 3 crows sat on a tree.
And they was black as crows could be.
And they all flapped their wings and cried. Billy McGee, my God. Said one old crow unto his mate. Billy McGee, my God.
Said one old crow unto his mate.
Billy McGee, my God. Said one old crow unto his mate.
What for our dinner shall us eat?
And they all flapped their wings and cried. Whoa, Billy McGee, my God. In yonder field there lies a horse. Billy McGee, my God.
In yonder field there lies a horse.
Billy McGee, my God. In yonder field there lies a horse.
And us will dine upon his corpse.
And they all flapped their wings and cried. Oh, Billy McGee, my God. We'll perch ourselves on his backbone. Billy McGee, my God.
We'll perch ourselves on his backbone.
Billy McGee, my God. We'll perch ourselves on his backbone.
And pluck his eyes out one by one.
And they all flapped their wings and cried. Billy McGee, my God.
We pause for station identification. The University of Chicago, in collaboration with CBS, is presenting the second in the series of dramatization known as The Human Adventure. This is the Columbia Broadcasting System.
This is The Human Adventure, collecting stories and songs representing the unwritten tradition of man's culture, sifting the dust of 40 centuries for a glimpse of man's past, mastering facts so that man may master the machine. All these are part of the human adventure, for a university's job is to learn.
Parole is a racket. Parole is a failure. A prison sentence is a punishment, a debt to society. Make the prisoners pay in full.
But what is parole?
Parole is a conditional release from prison under supervision. before the original sentence has completely expired.
Assuming a parole system, who should be released and who should not?
In 1928, a sadly perplexed man sat in his office in Springfield, Illinois. His name was Hinton G. Claybaugh, chairman of the Parole Board of Illinois. He had devoted his life to the rehabilitation of criminals. He had restored or refused liberty to thousands of men, weighing them by such scales as were available for society's welfare and protection.
What were his standards? Had they proved to be sound and wise? Should the present parole system continue or be scrapped? For 20 years, Mr. Claybaugh had been hearing and sifting, adopting and discarding advice, and he did not know the answer. He only knew that the public was aroused over the fact that certain paroled prisoners promptly committed new crimes.
This is the place. Yeah, this is it, all right.
Well?
Is Joe here? I want to talk to Joe.
Yeah, we want to talk to Joe.
Who are you?
They're just a couple of friends of Joe's. Old friends.
Joe? Oh, Joe!
What is it, Mabel? What do you... Say, what is this? Just a little visit, Joe. 10 years overdue.
We bought you a present, Joe.
This was Mr. Claybaugh's problem, to prevent such recurrences, to decide who should be released and who should be kept in prison. This was the problem he was pondering on a certain day in 1928 when a group of citizens called upon him.
Mr. Claybaugh, this committee represents a large group of voters here in the state. And we've come to discuss frankly what can be done about the present crime wave.
I presume from what you say that you have some very definite ideas on the subject.
We have. In a few words, we protest against the alarming abuse of parole in this state, against turning criminals loose to commit new crimes when they still ought to be in prison. Why, just last week, 2 parole killers murdered a man in cold blood.
I know.
And we want to know who decides what prisoners shall go free and when and how.
Here in Illinois, we've had the parole system for a good many years. We think it's here to stay. Up until last year, 1927, all cases were handled by a single officer in the Board of Pardons. Since then, we've had a parole board of 9 members.
And still you let men out to commit new crimes.
That does happen sometimes. But I wonder if you people really understand the facts. For instance, do you know how many criminals were paroled in Illinois last year?
A great deal too many, in our opinion.
Do you know how many criminals were apprehended and convicted?
We haven't the exact figures.
Do you know how many paroled prisoners committed new crimes and were returned to prison?
It isn't our business to answer those questions.
Why, no, we're not on the witness stand.
Neither is the parole board.
The newspapers seem to think you are, Mr. Claybaugh.
Sure, and so does the public.
All we want is the truth.
You're entitled to know the truth, ladies and gentlemen. I'm not simply trying to defend the parole board. Frankly, none of us know how best to handle parole. We want to know how to make it better. I'd appreciate any suggestions.
Well, why don't you ask the professors? They're always publishing books on crime.
The prof? Why, they never even go to the movies. What do they know about it?
Wait a minute, gentlemen. I think you've got something there. I wonder if the universities of Illinois, Northwestern, and Chicago would undertake an impartial study of our parole system. I'll ask them and see.
That was the challenge. A challenge to 3 universities to turn their scientific knowledge toward a practical problem of human conduct, to benefit humanity if possible.
The challenge was accepted, and a committee of 3 appointed. Professor Andrew A. Bruce of Northwestern University.
To write a history of the parole system of the state of Illinois.
Dean Albert J. Harnow of the University of Illinois.
To visit and examine state prisons.
Professor Ernest W. Burgess of the University of Chicago.
To study the records of paroled prisoners, find, if possible, the relationship between these men, their backgrounds, and their chances of making good if paroled.
Okay, get out. Make it snappy.
Is this the pen?
That's right. This is it. Hi, Joe.
Hiya, Bill. How many new ones today?
A couple of burglars, a forger, and a professor named Burgess.
A prop, huh? What's he in for? Stealing our razors?
Nah, he just come up for the ride. Says he wants to interview the boys. Claybar, the parole board, sent him. It's so.
To answer the question who should be released from prison and who should not, Professor Burgess collected the records of 3,000 convicts paroled from Joliet, Pontiac, and Bernard Penitentiary. Not their court records only, but their family background and childhood, their relatives, neighbors, companions, and habits.
Having analyzed these findings, he classified these criminals into groups and sought to compare and apply their records to prisoners seeking parole.
Why?
To determine whether or not these prisoners might prove favorable risks to society. Professor Burgess based his analysis on 27 fundamental factors.
All right. Who's the first man in the parole application file?
Number 6287, Bernard Penitentiary. He says that...
Never mind what he says. What's his offense?
Murder.
Give him a plus mark.
A plus mark for murder?
That's right. Now, what's the sentence? Life?
Life.
Another plus.
He served 14 years, 10 months.
Minus.
That was his first offense.
Plus.
He has no previous criminal record.
Give him a plus.
In prison, he has worked out 10 minor punishments.
Minus.
Hey, look, Professor Burgess, I know I'm new here, but how can you do this? Plus, minus, plus, minus? On what are you basing these judgments?
On the records of 3,000 criminals who have been paroled, who have succeeded or failed on parole. You see, just as insurance companies can predict the average lifespan of a group of men, so we've been able to predict the expectancy of success, where parole is concerned, in criminals of certain groups. For instance, let's consider the type of crime and the type of criminal who committed it.
I never worked with a gang. I worked alone. I figured out my own jobs, and I did them without the help of nobody.
The lone wolf criminal is not a good parole risk. Our statistics prove he is 5 times as likely to violate his parole as another criminal who worked with associates.
Yeah, they call me Fingers. I can write your own name better than you can write it yourself. Just give me a pen, a checkbook, and a copy of J.P. Morgan's signature.
Criminals convicted of forgery and fraud have a high violation of parole. They are bad risks.
I killed them. Sure, I killed them. I tried to get away, but they got me. I've been in prison 26 years.
Murderers and sex offenders have a low rate of parole violation and generally appear to be good risks. But the longer they have served, the poorer risks they become.
The best parole risks are immigrants, farm boys, young and old men, first offenders, occasional offenders. The bad or poor parole risks are transients and hobos, drug addicts, middle-aged men, habitual and professional criminals. And average or medium parole risks are burglars, gangsters, men of low intelligence.
Well, sure, that's easy to say after just looking at a number of past records. But how well does the professor's plan work?
Did anyone ever try it?
Yes. In 1933, the Illinois Parole Board ordered the Burgess table applied to all parole requests. Before 1933, 25% of all paroles were violated. But in the first year of application of the Burgess table, violations dropped to only 16%, dropped to 11% by 1936, only 3 years after the introduction of the new system.
And are still dropping.
To the medical profession, death is the only enemy, to be resented, resisted, routed if possible. Today, practicing physicians trained by universities in the scientific laboratory method and in the clinical approach of observation devote their lives to the search for new and more effective means of cheating death.
Labor long and patiently to prove that mankind need not, shall not suffer.
Such a physician is Dr. George R. Minot, professor of medicine at Harvard and director of Harvard's Thorndike Memorial Laboratory at the Boston City Hospital.
The year 1911, the place, Massachusetts General Hospital in Boston.
Office calling Dr. Minus. Office calling Dr. Minus. Dr. Minus.
Calls Amina?
Yes, Dr. Minus. Dr. Mills would like to have you confirm his diagnosis of a new patient in 49. He believes it's pernicious anemia.
Thanks, Miss.
Pernicious anemia, a disease that causes patients to grow pale, weary, and bloodless as the red corpuscles in the blood diminish and the tiny bodies which give us our energy disappear from the system.
Come in.
Good morning. I'm Dr. Minor. Dr. Mills wanted me to have a look at you. Well, how do you feel?
I'm so tired, Doctor. It's an effort just to draw breath.
Just a moment while I look at your chart.
Color, pale yellow. Heart, accelerated. Tongue, sore. Complains of muscular tingling and fatigue. Looks like PA, all right. Now, Mr. Jones, try and answer my questions carefully, for I want to help you. When did you first notice that something was wrong?
I can't say exactly. It came on sort of gradual, maybe 6 months ago.
Mm-hmm.
The work at the office got harder and harder. By 5 o'clock, I was all in.
You were never bothered this way before?
Never. I've always been strong as an ox. My doctor, what's happening to me? What's wrong?
Dr. Minot couldn't answer that, but he could ask questions. Kind but relentless as a district attorney, he asked everything, forgot nothing, read and studied and experimented, and at last reached his first important conclusion.
The X-rays indicate without doubt that there's something wrong with the bone marrow of pernicious anemia patients. It doesn't function properly. Throws off immature red corpuscles in great quantities. So, obviously this malady is not caused by some mysterious poison that dissolves the cells. The question is, why doesn't the bone marrow supply the cells the way it should?
That was the question, that was the challenge. For 10 years, to find the answer, Dr. Minot tried everything except giving up. First, he operated upon the spleens of patients who were so far gone that death was imminent. The removal of the spleen had been known to cure nematolic jaundice, a malfunctioning of the red corpuscles. But in operations upon pernicious anemia patients, Dr. Minot met with worse than failure, met with a brief, heartbreaking improvement, followed by relapse. He also tried transfusions, one after another, and the transfusions did help briefly.
Yes, I do feel improved, Doctor. Only it doesn't last.
Yes, I know.
I wouldn't mind living on other people's blood, like a vampire, if I could get well. But it's such a little while, always for shorter and shorter time that I'm benefited. Dr. Minot, you've got to tell me.
Anything I can, Mrs. Smith.
I've a husband and 3 children, Doctor. I've got to know whether it's any use. Really, all these transfusions, all this expense. Tell me, Doctor, please.
Very well, Mrs. Smith. I shan't try to deceive you. The truth is, we can't promise you a single thing except...
I knew it. I knew it.
Except this. This I do know. Someday, somehow, the treatment and cure for pernicious anemia is going to be found. Now, you owe it to your family to keep alive. To let science keep you alive as long as possible, in the hope that this discovery will come in time.
I'll try, Doctor. Only hurry. Hurry.
That was in 1921, just 10 years from the time Dr. Minot had graduated from medical school. 10 years in which he had searched with all his energy and will and found practically nothing. Tired, momentarily discouraged, the physician leaned against the door of the hospital.
Hurry, she said. Hurry, doctor. For 10 years I've been hurrying. Where am I? What do I know about pernicious anemia? How much nearer the answer am I than when I started? Will the cure ever be found, or must we go on watching patients dwindle away and die, our hands tied, powerless?
Powerless to what, George?
Oh, hello, Charlie. Nothing, I guess. Just talking to myself. I'm done in.
You look tired. And thin. Say, how long since you've had a vacation?
What does that matter?
Matters a lot. I've been watching you lately. You've lost weight. Your color's bad.
Nonsense, Charlie. I've been working too hard, that's all. A couple of nights sleep and I'll...
When did you have your last physical examination?
I don't know. Why?
Plenty. Step in here, young man, and take off your shirt.
Oh, Charlie, be yourself. There's nothing wrong with me, nothing in the world. A little fatigue. I'm okay.
In 1921, Dr. Minot was in charge of a medical service at the Huntington Memorial Hospital for cancer patients. He was associate in medicine at the Peter Bent Brigham Hospital and consultant in diseases of the blood at the Massachusetts General. He taught at the Harvard Medical School, cared for his private patients, and still managed to squeeze in a few precious hours a day in his laboratory studying diseases of the blood.
But it's more than overwork. More than just fatigue.
Well, what's the verdict? Speak up, Charlie. How long have I got to live?
Can you take the truth, George?
Well, I've been looking for it for a long time. Are you giving it away?
This is serious, George.
Come on. Why so grim? What's the matter with you?
Nothing the matter with me. But there's plenty wrong with you. I don't know how to say it.
Quit stalling. Has he got a name?
Yes. Not a pretty one either. You've got diabetes, George.
Diabetes? Huh? Possible. Why, you never saw a healthier person in your life.
Have a look at the analysis if you don't believe me.
Albumin? Sugar? Sugar?
That's right. You've got all the symptoms, inside and out. Take a look at yourself in the mirror.
Yeah, I do look sort of like a ghost. But it's impossible, Charlie, I tell you. It's impossible. How long have I got, Sally?
How old are you?
34.
Works fast for the young man. I'd say 2, 3 years maybe if you diet.
If I starve myself to death, you mean?
Call it what you like. But you can keep yourself alive a few years anyhow. You owe that to your wife and kids, your patients.
My family, my patients. I can die yet, Charlie. I'm too busy. I got too much to do.
Maybe it won't happen, George. Maybe somebody will find a remedy. Perhaps it'll come in time.
In time. My own words, that poor woman. And she promised to carry on. Well, if she can, I guess I can. I can try anyhow.
"6 months, a year, with death staring him in the face, coming closer every day, Dr. Minot kept himself alive, kept working. He grew weaker, more gaunt as the weeks passed, but his spirit never flagged. His resolve to find a remedy for pernicious anemia, to save the lives of others before his own end came, this resolve never faded.
An heroic battle against fate and time. But Dr. Minot was not working alone. In the medical school of Toronto, a young Canadian surgeon named Banting, a man who felt as Minot did, that no disease was hopeless, was working on diabetes, trying to accomplish what men had endeavored to prove for 150 years, that diabetes was caused by the lack of a substance called insulin, ordinarily manufactured in the minute pancreas glands. On a certain day in 1922, Dr. Banting found that extracts of partially degenerated pancreas did contain insulin. Insulin which might be extracted from normal pancreas, given to patients suffering from diabetes, and thus enable them to lead normal lives. So Dr. Minot, because of the discovery of a fellow scientist, learned that he could eat again, could grow stronger, could live.
With death cheated through the tireless efforts of science, Dr. Minot went ahead with his work, fighting now not against death, but for life, the lives of the patients who trusted him.
More months of futile, discouraging effort to save the victims of pernicious anemia. But in the course of that effort, Dr. Minot picked up a clue here, a hint there.
Where do you live, Mrs. Strickland?
The country.
What kind of country?
Farming.
What do you eat?
Well, we have meat for dinner, but I don't take much myself.
Well, what do you eat?
Lots of milk. I think milk's grand for you. Butter and cream.
Fond of dairy products. What they all say. Funny. In the countries where there are lots of dairies, you find the most pernicious anemia.
Yes, Doctor?
Nothing. I was just taking notes. I'm always taking notes about people's habits and diets.
These notes and those of scores of other such interviews were analyzed by Dr. Minot. One fact stood out, that the everyday diet of most patients had been deficient in meat of all kinds. This was discussed with Dr. William P. Murphy of the Massachusetts General Hospital.
Yes, Minot, the facts seem quite evident.
But it may be only coincidence. I've no proof that the lack of meat is the cause.
That's true. Yet you can now correlate this fact with the studies of other men in related diseases.
Pellagra, for instance?
Certainly. Fresh meat is used as a treatment for that disease.
And I recall that fresh liver has been successfully used to increase the red corpuscles in guinea pigs suffering from scurvy. Doctor, I think I'm at last on the trail of something, although I don't know just what.
Reading further medical literature on diseases of blood, discussing technical problems of pernicious anemia with a few colleagues, Dr. Minot gradually, carefully began to filter his findings to make one or two of them clear enough to be used as a basis for a bold step forward in clinical research.
Here's an interesting item. Points exactly to my analyses. Whipple and Robscheid Robbins of the University of Rochester have found the use of liver favorable to blood regeneration in dogs suffering from ordinary anemia.
Dr. Minot quietly gave the order that liver be added to the diets of his pernicious anemia patients. Then he waited and watched, recording the reactions of his patients.
Patients feeling better. soreness disappearing, appetites returning.
10 patients eating a quarter pound of liver a day, 15, 20, all of them showing signs of improvement. But Dr. Minot was a scientist, and the scientist is skeptical. He didn't jump to conclusions or rush into print. He didn't want to arouse people's hopes until he knew. But he suggested to Dr. Murphy that liver be added to the diet of his pernicious anemia patients at the Peter Bent Brigham Hospital.
The world knows the results. Liver, once thrown to alley cats, and liver extract became the successful treatment for pernicious anemia. Dr. George Minot had fought and won. For this, he was awarded the Nobel Prize. The lives of thousands of sufferers saved, and a dread disease half conquered because men had been trained in universities to develop their powers of observation and deduction. Liver is but a remedy for pernicious anemia, a treatment. Insulin, only a remedy for diabetes. But because of such men as Minot, Murphy, Banting, Whipple, and others who have carried their work forward, because of the patience and persistence of science, someday the complete cures for these diseases may be found. But until cures for the manifold ills of mankind are found, science will never search ceasing, never cease using everything it sees and hears and experiences and thinks toward this end.
The end that mankind need not, shall not suffer.
You have just heard The Human Adventure, the second in a limited series of one-hour weekly programs presented by the University of Chicago in collaboration with the Columbia Broadcasting System. The stories dramatized are examples from various fields of university research, seeking to open up the closed books of man's past and future, and all characters are portrayed by professional actors. A university's job is to learn, and today, as never before, the great American universities are learning vital and important facts and principles, searching further and further for the yet undiscovered secrets of life. This is The Human Adventure.
Would you like to know more about machines that take away the jobs of men? Would you like to read the stories of university research on such vital subjects as parole and pernicious anemia, and how this work affects you? If so, the University of Chicago will be happy to send you a comprehensive list of both popular and technical books available in most public libraries. There's no cost save a 3-cent stamp for return postage. Address your stamps and letters to Radio Office, University of Chicago, Illinois. Next week at the same time, the University of Chicago will present another full-hour dramatic program depicting other phases of the human adventure.
The adventure in which you, perhaps unknowingly, play a part. The adventure that is as stimulating, as exciting, as dramatic as the life it seeks to benefit.
The Human Adventure is presented each week at the same time in the interest of knowledge and learning, to enrich the background and education of every listener, young and old. The Human Adventure is a presentation of the University of Chicago in collaboration with the Columbia Broadcasting System.